Welcome back to my series where I review follower Chief Gear. So, this guy, he sent me his stuff a couple weeks ago, or at least over a week ago for sure. So, I think it was right before SVS last week. I am like a week and a half behind, and I apologize profusely. So, he has potentially already changed his gear, but I'm going to review what I have right now. And I do have his stuff blocked, but he is in an older state. So, based on the fact that he is in an older state and has probably been playing for probably 2 years by now, maybe even longer, I'm going to guess that he is either a free to play or a low spin player. And so he's not a whale in his state. He's probably not the strongest person in his state, although he is pretty strong. Okay, so let's take a look. So his infantry jacket is at T2 legendary, and his infantry pants are also T2 legendary. So it's twins. We like twins here. And then his marksman ring is T1 1 star, and his marksman staff is T1 1 star. And his marksman gear is just slightly below his infantry gear, so it's kind of a little stair step, and we do like the infantry to be higher than the marksman gear. So then we take a look at his lancer gear, and we see that it's T1 3 stars legendary and T1 3 stars. So again, that's matchy matchy, and so that's perfect. Like, that looks good. Um, we can also see that his infantry and his marksmen are stair step, his lancers are actually between his infantry and marksman gear. So his lancer gear is stronger, and you don't see that as much unless they play 60-40, which 60-40-0, which, if you've been following my channel and you've been reading some of the comments, you will know that typically Wells will use a 60-40-0, 60% infantry, 40% lancers, 0% marksmen when they play. And so if they do that, then you would expect their infantry and lancer gear to be higher than their marksman gear, and they probably wouldn't prioritize their marksman gear. So his marksman gear aren't that far behind his lancer and chief gear. I mean, his lancer and infantry gear. So I wouldn't say he's not prioritizing them, but he is definitely putting infantry and lancers above marksmen. So he might be in a state that has like a 60-40, like that's the preferred ratio for the state. Or he is using some other ratio I'm not familiar with, where it might be, like 50-35-15, right? So 50% infantry, 35% lancers, 15% archers or marksmen. And a lot of how you design your gear is going to depend on the heroes that you use, how you play the game, your preferences, things of that nature. So, the important thing though is that he's obviously got a plan and he's following it, and it matches, right? So I think when we're looking at his chief gear, before I could technically judge whether he should stop working on his lancer gear and bring his marksman up, I think I would need to know what ratio he uses and the why. So let's take a look at the charms. So based on how he does his chief gear, I'm going to guess his lancer charms are going to be higher than his marksman charms. But maybe not. Okay, so for marksman, he has 9 and 2 8s. And over here, they're all 8s. which, again, we've talked about, while those don't match, a lot of times you have time, you have enough to do one, but the other has to wait until the next SVS or whatever. And then infantry, I'm not necessarily surprised to see that his infantry are higher. So it's 11, 12, 11. And then over here, these are actually lower than I would have anticipated. These are all 8s. So I know why one of these is 11. What I would say is I don't think he should touch any of these charms over here until he's raised these charms up to be as high as the jacket charms. And then if we look at the Lancer gear, the Lancer is actually lower than the Marksman charms, because remember, the Marksman charms, the first one over here is a 9, and so it's 988, and these are actually all 8s. And then over here, these are actually 6s, so these are even lower, and it's not balanced. So the first thing I would say he needs to do is bring these up to match the 8s. That's the very first thing I would have him do. The next thing is, and this is going to depend on how he plays, because if he prioritizes Lancers, which we would think from his chief gear, then he probably wants to prioritize his Lancers charms, because again, Lancers and Marksmen are typically the ones that you want to have the highest lethality, right? The infantry, you want them strong as an ox, but they're not as agile, and their lethality isn't like the stronger lethality is more effective with Marksmen and Lancers because of their role, right? So I would kind of want to have a conversation with him about why he plays this way, because it would be interesting to me if he's doing 60-40-0, for instance, then he should definitely raise his Lancer's charms. Like, they're too low. He needs to bring those up. If he's playing another ratio, where it's like 50, 35, 15, then again, he needs to bring his Lancer charms up. If he's playing where he is 50, 15, 35, then he needs to bring his Marksman chief gear up. Do y'all see the pattern? Looking at this, looking at his chief gear, I would say that he uses a higher percentage of Lancers than he does Marksmen. Looking at his charms, it looks like he uses a higher percentage of Marksmen. And so I think that he needs to consider that when he goes to upgrade his charms and or his gear. So but I wouldn't say that what he has right now across the board makes 100% sense. And maybe it does, and there's some information, like, I know that this is an educational channel, but I started this channel to teach people in my alliance how to do things like do their squads and help them figure out how to grow their gear. And I am more knowledgeable than them, but I am by no means the whiteout survival expert. I am knowledgeable, I do research, but there are people out there doing impressive things with and people are creative, and people, some people, and I've talked about this in my resource, where they do a lot of research and testing, and I'm not quite there yet, right? So anyway, all that is to say that overall I think he's doing a really good job. I think that because there's some incongruity between his chief gear and his charms and how he's growing them, I think he probably needs to iron that out. His chief gear is fine if he prioritizes lancers. If he does use a higher percentage of marksman, then he needs to bring his marksman gear up and keep them higher than his lancer gear in the future. And then his charms, he needs to bring up his lancer gear if he prioritizes lancer ratio. But overall, like I like what I see, and if he is a free to play player, then he's doing a really great job of growing his gear. It can be a little hard as a free to play player to make sure that you're, able to bring them all up consistently. So if he is free to play, he's doing a great job at that.